handle the meal on this year's Erev Pesach, which is Shabbos, Erev Pesach Shechol b'Shabbos. And last time we discussed, or the last two times, we discussed the option of what's known as matzah ashira, what we commonly know as egg matzah, as a possibility. And we discussed various options about eating egg matzah, how to eat it, for what meals to eat it, depending on whether you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi in some cases. But now let's move on and deal with the people, such as myself, who don't eat matzah ashira.
Harry, let me just interject. Having just come from Osher Ad,
yes,
the sea of humanity that it was, there's one prominent display of matzah ashira.
Okay.
By the by.
By the by. Anyway, I generally don't eat matzah ashira. That's not to say, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand me, that it's necessarily asur, and there are certainly situations where one can take advantage of matzah ashira. It's just that Baruch Hashem, I don't fall into those categories, and therefore my minhag is not to eat matzah ashira on Pesach. But what does that mean about Yud Dalet? So we saw before that except for Rashi, basically, most poskim say that you can eat it on Yud Dalet, but there are a group of people, and as I said, I count myself among them, who won't eat matzah ashira even on Erev Pesach. So what do people like me do? Okay, so the answer is the age-old answer, that's eat bread, okay? But let's discuss how we do that. That's not so, it's not like, oh, gee, I'm going to have Friday night dinner and Shabbos morning, I have to eat earlier, but I'll just eat bread and everything's fine. So if your answer to the question is that you're going to eat bread, the first piece of advice is that the only chametz element in the meal should be bread. Everything else should be pesadik, or at the most kitnius, okay? And the utensils and plates and everything that you use should be chad pamim, should be plastic or paper, which can be disposed of after the meals. And how do I separate the chametz from the pesadik? So, because if I'm eating bread, I have chametz, and then I'm going to eat pesadik. So if I'm going to eat on, what happens to the foods in that meal are really irrelevant. But what I have to be concerned is that I don't carry over my chametz into what's pesadik in the house. Okay. So the first thing you should probably do is put on a plastic tablecloth, a disposable tablecloth, okay? I will tell you what I used to do in America when I lived in New York City, and what I did since I've moved to Israel. So what we used to do in America, we lived in an apartment, and there were two entrances to the apartment. There was the entrance from the elevator, and then there was an entrance from the back stairs. So we used to set up to make motzi on the back stairs, which was adjacent to the kitchen, which I'll explain to you what the issue with that is. And then after we ate bread, we would dispose of the sharayim for that particular meal, not then, but wrap them up, and then move into the kitchen and eat the balance of the meal. Here, what we do is we move to the basement, and we set up a folding table downstairs, and we eat. Okay, now there are several suggestions about how you should do this. One is that you make kiddush, you make motzi, right? You clean the chametz off the table and eat the rest of the meal even if you're using real Pesach dishes. In other words, you can eat the meal on real Pesach dishes if you've prepared it. If you've prepared Pesach, that's the dishes are not the problem. The only problem is, are the Pesach dishes going to come in contact with some chametz? So for that reason, I suggest disposable dishes. But if you're not inclined to do that, you can eat on Pesach dishes. You just have to make sure that the bread is disposed of from the meal and off of the table and off of the tablecloth, etc., before you sit down to eat. The other thing is, and we often don't think about this, is that you may have to clean your mouth out. You might brush your teeth or something, so that if you're using real silverware or real dishes, there's no chametz left in your mouth. For that reason, I strongly urge you to use chad pamim, disposable dishes, okay? Another possibility is to eat bread in one room. Have in mind when you're eating the bread that you will finish it in another room. Finish the meal in another room. And then you can bench in that second room. The problem is that normally if you eat in one room and then go somewhere else and decide to bench, it doesn't really work well. If it's all sort of one room and you can see from one or the other, it's less of a problem. But, Jews make problems out of everything. So if you're moving from one room to the other, so then what you do is, some say it's enough that if you think about the fact, I'm making motzi in room A, but I'm eating my meal in room B, that you can bench there. Alternatively, you can make motzi in the first room and eat just a bit of the bread in room number 2. In other words, you don't take all of the bread, you take just a piece, you eat it sort of very carefully in room 2, and then there's no problem benching in room 2. All right. In addition, one should keep a piece of bread, if that's what he's eating. He should keep a piece of bread, which he puts in a plastic bag or something, so that he can put it on the table, because basically you should bench with a piece of whatever you made motzi on the table. So you don't have to take an enormous piece. You take a piece, you put it in a plastic bag or a paper bag, you put it on the table, and then you eat. And then you bench. I'm sorry. Another possibility is to eat in chametz pots and dishes that are disposable totally. In other words, not just the plates, but even the pots or the things that you serve them in are disposable. The real question is, what do I do with leftover chametz? In other words, okay, I've done all of this. I've got bread. So I could share with you a saying that I grew up with. My father was a naval officer, and he learned in the Navy the following line: take all you want, eat all you take. In other words, you can have as much bread as you want, but just make sure you eat all of it. But if that's not realistic, which it generally isn't, what you can do is you can take the leftover bread, sort of crumble it up, and flush it down the toilet. Or alternatively, whatever is left over, one can sprinkle economica or something like that on the leftovers and then throw them out. You can also, if you have a pet, feed the leftovers to an animal if that option is available. And if you have an ozer or an ozeret who is not Jewish, there is no problem. And this is what we generally do, but it's going to be Shabbos, so I don't know if it's going to work. You put it aside, you give it to them before the time to be finished with chametz is, and you say, this is yours, put it in a bag, cover it up, and he or she goes home with it, okay? Now, generally, we would think that this is really a no-brainer, right? Just get rid of the chametz. But I just want to read to you something that I came across that will enlighten you as to how many things have to be taken into account when you do this. But in other words, how many things have to be taken into account in disposing of your chametz. I mean, normally you would say, put it in the bed, put it in the garbage, and present the Gemara in Yan, right? It's over. You did whatever you had to do. You got rid of the chametz. Okay. Im yesh harbe chametz, and this is from Rav Rimon says, Sefer, nitan lahafkiroto ulhashlicho b'rshut harabim. Okay, you can just say it's hefker, it's not mine anymore, I'm not the baal of it, and put it in the reshut harabim, of course, provided that there is an eruv. However, this is not all that clear. Harishonim nechleku imutal lahafkir chafatzim b'Shabbos. Can I be mafkir something on Shabbos? In other words, there's a problem with making a kinyan on Shabbos, right? Can somebody give me something to make a kinyan on Shabbos? Generally, we say, no, we don't make kinyanim on Shabbos. Now, this is the opposite. Can I retract my ba'alut, my ownership of something on Shabbos? That is being mafkirid, okay? The old Rishonim Svurim shall also lahafkir b'Shabbos. There's a group of Rishonim says, no, you can't. Kivan shahahefker domel kinyan. The same way I can't make a kinyan on Shabbos, right? This comes up, and maybe I shouldn't say this because I don't want to, it's better to be shogegin than beizidin. But let's say you're invited out Friday night, okay? Can I bring the host a present? So the best way to do that is to bring them something that can be consumed at the meal, okay? What if I bring them something else? So the halacha is that you're not really supposed to give somebody to make somebody a kinyan on it. So if you bring it to them, the person can say, well, thank you very much, but I'm not making the kinyan until after Shabbos, whatever. So here, right? So what are the Rishonim who say you can't be mafker? It's like making a kinyan. I can't make a kinyan on Shabbos, or I'm not supposed to make a kinyan, and therefore I cannot remove my balut on Shabbos. V'ilu ha'meiri v'rishonim nosofim kotvu shemutar lavkir b'Shabbos, because they say, no, you can't make a kinyan, but you can get rid of something on Shabbos. V'chein das ha'magen Avram v'Rabbi Kiva Eiger b'nidon denan kiven she'onu matiru lotet et chametz b'matana l'goy b'Shabbos. One of the possibilities is that I can give it to somebody non-Jewish on Shabbos. I know he's going to make a kinyan. I can give him a gift, and everybody agrees that that's all right. So similarly, I can be mafkir things. Okay. Now listen to what happens because you live in Israel. Okay. I never thought of this, I must admit, but because we live in Israel, we encounter all sorts of different halachic problems that and this is not an advertisement for Chutz La'aretz, which we never thought of and never encounter in Chutz La'aretz. Omnam, im zorech lepach ashpa. What if I throw it out in the garbage? Okay. It's possible shadayin lo patar tabaya. You're still not rid of the problem of chametz. Ki hu b'rechush shel Yehudim. The garbage cans belong to the Jewish municipality, which means that when I put it in the pach, it still belongs to Jews. Okay, so that's a problem. But there are those who are makel and say, no, it's not really a problem because once I put it in the garbage, it's dirty, nobody wants it. Nobody's going to make a kinyan on that. Omnam mistaber. If the pach belongs to the city or wherever you're living, because everybody has access to the garbage, and anybody who wants to take something out of the garbage can, then maybe it's hefker. So then you run in. What are you doing when you put it in the pach? You're being mafkirid. And if you're mafkirid, you run into the problem with those Rishonim who say you can't be mafkir. However, if you want to be machmir that maybe you shouldn't be mafkir or something on Shabbos, you shouldn't put it in the garbage. Now listen, we've all had this experience. You put something out on the street to be taken away by the garbage. You walk out 15 minutes later, somebody has picked it up and taken it. Now, normally you don't find people who go through the garbage, but hayu dvarim me'olam, that can happen. So maybe you have to be concerned there. So what do they suggest? You should either put economic or soap on it. Then nobody will take it if they pay attention to it. Okay. HaChazon Ish Kotav So in other words, what happened? This is in the situation where I'm going to say kol chamira on Shabbos, right? By definition, if I'm eating bread, right, I can't say the second choch, not the one when I did bedikas chametz, but the one I do when I burn the chametz. If I'm going to eat bread on Shabbos, by definition, I can't say that kol chamira on Friday. I have to say it on Shabbos. So the Chazon Ish says that if you're mavaya chametz lacha sheish sha'ot on Shabbos, yesh lo sima lav sabona chomer poge machea. Then what you have to do is you have to put on soap or something. Kedei shelo yeru l'machol kalev. You have to make it so it's not roy lachilas kalev, and then throw it on. Kedei shelo, or flush it down the toilet. Omnam imavarim et hachametz lifnei hashohashi. She said, you don't wait till the very last minute. Then he says you can put it in the garbage by putting it in the bathroom. Rather, it's not roy, but it's better to crumble it up and flush it down the toilet. So, what you do with your chametz is also an issue. It's not just enough to take it and throw it away. Okay, so now it should go without saying that the best way to handle the issue of leftovers is to buy a small amount of bread as you can and consume it all, okay? There is another interesting suggestion made by Rav Zolti. Rav Betzalel Zolti was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. He was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. I'll tell you an interesting story that I was told by someone. The Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Hebron had a daughter, and whose hand was sought by three of the Talmidim in the yeshiva. One was Rav Zolti, who ultimately became the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. One was Rav Goren, who became the chief rabbi of Israel. And one was Rav Farbstein, who ultimately won her hand. And this goes back, I don't know how many years ago, 50, 60 years ago, right? And so they all had tremendous milas. Rav Zolti was an unbelievable masmid, and Rav Goren was an Eli Otzum, and Rav Farbstein was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. And they all were vying for the Rosh Yeshiva's daughter's hand. You know, it was a chashav v'shidduch. And anyway, Rav Farbstein ultimately wins her hand, not Rav Zolti and not Rav Goren. So somebody I know once asked Rav Farbstein, tell me, what was the secret? Why did you win, for lack of a better term, why did you win the Queen Esther contest? And he said, I'll tell you the truth. I took her to the movies. Nobody else thought to take her to a movie. And she ended up marrying Rav Farbstein. But Rav Zolti was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He wrote Shilas and Chuvas and Chidushei Torah, et cetera, et cetera. He had the following interesting take on what should be done, or suggestion as to what should be done. And he says the following. Lefot matzah lo shelo l'shem mitzvah. Bake matzahs not l'shem mitzvah. In other words, not for the mitzvah of achilas matzah. Ula'ochla b'sudot Shabbos. And use the matzah that you clearly declared, I am not baking this matzah as matzahs mitzvah, to eat those matzahs during the Sudot of Shabbat. Ubishas hadchak, this heter was recognized by Rav Ovadia Yosef and others. Why? What's going on here? It's matzah. We don't eat matzah on Erev Pesach. So he says, b'mitzvahs eila, b'matzos eila rather, lo yotzim yidei chovah, b'leil seder, the matzahs which we consume on Seder night must be l'shem matzahs mitzvah. And therefore, I couldn't eat these matzahs. But they're not chometz. L'chura ein isur be'ichil hasan, says Rav Zoltan. There's no isur to eat them. He depends on a Gemara in Pesachim, shemuta la'achol b'tzeikot shel nachrim be'erev Pesach. You can eat cooked stuff, non-chometz stuff made by goyim on Shabbos, on Erev Pesach. Ulam yesh lahasbir shomet Gemara gam acheret. Ikashi tato shel harav Zolti. How do you have to understand Rav Zolti's shita? Tuluyah lechura b'chakira. How you understand the following? Ahim isur achilas matzah be'erev Pesach hu beglal she'asur le'achol for malid matzah sheyotzim ba yidei chova. On the one hand, what's the isur of eating matzah Erev Pesach? Is the isur of eating matzah Erev Pesach simply that I cannot eat matzah that otherwise I would eat? I can't eat matzah because this is the matzah that I would eat at the Seder, right? Why? Because only matzahs mitzvah are the ones that I can eat. If that's the case, if this is not a matzahs mitzvah, it's just a baked good, which is not chometz, I should be able to eat it. All right. Avol yesh k'mochein yitachein shamatzah hashmura mechimetz nechshevet k'matzah shmura lamrod shenefta shelo l'shem matzahs mitzvah. But on the other hand, one could suggest it's still matzah. Technically, I can't eat it tonight. Technically, I can't eat it, but it has the taste of matzah. It's everything. So when I get to matzah at the Seder, I won't be eating matzah b'te'avo because I've already eaten matzah. It tastes like matzah. It looks like matzah. It cracks like matzah. Everything about it is matzah. Clearly, when Rav Zolti made this suggestion, he goes with the first part of the equation. That what? Only matzah that's asur on Erev Pesach is that which I could eat at the Seder. I can't eat this at the Seder, and therefore it's all right. Okay, so that's how we're going to deal. That's how we're going to deal with what we eat. So if you're going to eat bread, just to summarize, don't buy too much. Make sure everybody has enough that they can make hamotzi. Be very careful where you put the matzah, where it goes, et cetera, et cetera. If you're going to use real Pesach plates, clean the table off very well before, and then go on with your meal. And what's ever left over, either flush down the toilet or put something on it and throw it out. Okay. What about Sudah Shlishit? The obligation to eat 3 meals on Shabbos is learned from the Gemara says learns it from the following pasuk. And this is a pasuk that has to do with the man. Vayoma Moshe ichlu hayom, ki Shabbos hayom lashem, hayom lo simtza'u b'soda. He says, right, what should you do? Collect on Friday a double portion, because tomorrow you will not find man in the Sada, right? Because today is Shabbos, or tomorrow will be Shabbos, and you won't be able to find any in the Sada. But what happens in that pasuk, or what appears in that pasuk, is that the word hayom appears 3 separate times. Vayom Moshe ichluhu hayom, 1. Ki Shabbos hayom lashem, 2. Hayom, today, lo simtza'u b'sada. Since it's Shabbos, you won't find. So from there, the Gemara says each one of those yom is keneged a su'udah of Shabbos, and therefore there are 3 sudot on Shabbos: Friday night, Shabbos, and Sudah Shlishit. I won't get into there is a discussion about what happens if something happens you can't eat Friday night. Can you eat 3 on Shabbos day? Most Rishonim seem to say yes, then you make it up during the day, but let's go with the traditional Friday night Shabbos Sudah Shlishit. What is required to be eaten in Sudah Shlishit? So not surprisingly, there's a machlokas Rishonim as to what has to be eaten. So in one day, Tosfos says, Sudah Shlishit, like the other 2 meals, requires bread. The second day in Tosfos says that you can yotze, you don't have to eat bread, you can eat basar v'dagim. Okay? Other Rishonim hold, Rosh holds, you can eat just about anything that is made from one of the 5 types of grain. It's made from wheat, it's made from barley, it's made from oats, it's made from spelt, and it's made from rye. If it's something, in other words, it can be a cake, it can be a cookie, it can be a cracker, as long as it's made from that and you eat enough of it, then you yotze Sudah Shlishit. The Rabbeinu Tam says it has to be minei tagima. Minei tagima is translated as fruits and sweets. That's sufficient. And the Ran says it's enough if you eat fruit. Okay. I'll just tell you, there's another daya that says that, and I've said this offered at Shalashudas in Shul. There's another daya that says you can be Yotzei Shalashudas by saying a Dvar Torah. Okay? So the Beis Halevi, who's one of the original members of the original member of the Brisker dynasty, once came to a place, and it came time, he was a guest in some shtat in Europe, and it came time for Sudah Shlishit. And he asked, wherever he was, could they bring him Lechem Mishnah so he could wash and have Sudah Shlishit? And I guess whoever was the Balabas said to him, the Gemara says you can be Yotzei Shalashudas with a Dvar Torah. So you're about to say a Dvar Torah, you don't really need bread, just say the Dvar Torah, you'll be Yotzei Shalashudas. So Sudah Shlishit. So the Beis Halevi said the following to him. Look, if I say a Dvar Torah, and you listen to the Dvar Torah, or somebody here listens to the Dvar Torah, and he contradicts the Dvar Torah, and he's right, then what I said wasn't correct. It wasn't really a Dvar Torah. It was wrong. I'm not sure that that's true, but that's what he said. He said, if you bring me bread, nobody can contradict bread. Bread is bread, so please bring me bread. So according to those, there are Rishonim who say you have to eat bread. One day in Tosfos says you have to eat bread, okay? When should Shalashudas or Sudah Shlishit be eaten? So Tosfos and the Rambam hold only after Mincha, which is 30 minutes, Chatzi Sha'ah, after Chatzot Hayom Sha'az Maniyot. So I don't know exactly what time Chatzot Hayom is. Let's say it's around 12:30 this time of the year. It'll be later because we're changing the clock. So a half hour after that is when Sudah Shlishit is. The Bahag disagrees and says you can eat Sudah Shlishit before Mincha. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins as follows. Tzorech la'asosa bepat. First, he paskins like the first day in Tosfos. Sudah Shlishit should be eaten with bread. Then he adds, v'yeshomrin. I take it back. He doesn't paskin like Tosfos. He brings the first day of Tosfos. V'yeshomrin sheyachol la'asota k'chol ma'achal ha'asui me'achad mi'chameshes mini dagan. Okay, like the rush, you can eat any one of the 5 categories of grains. V'yeshomrim shoyachol la'asota b'dvarim shemelaftin bahem hapas kibasa ukidagim. Like the second day in Tosfos, you can eat meat or fish That's sufficient. Avolo bepeirot. So in other words, he rejects the ran. I'm sorry, he does in that shita, when he brings that yesh omrim, he rejects the ran. V'yesh omrim, dafilu bepeiros yachol asosa, like the ran, that peiros are enough. Usfara rishona ika. The best way to be yotzei sudash lishit, says the mechaber, is with bread. Ela imkain hu savea biyoter. Unless he can't somehow stomach bread, then it's enough if he eats one of the others. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll pick it up. Wait a second, let me just finish one more thing. And when should you eat sudash lisit? Zmana mishiagia zman ha-mincha. When it's time for mincha, hainu sheisha ot umechzel amala. So in other words, he paskins like the Tosfos and the Rambam, that you should eat it a half hour after chatzot. B'yam asah kodem lechein, says the Shulchan Aruch. But if you ate sudash lishit before that time, lo kiyem mitzvah sudash lishit, then you're not yotzei sudash lishit. So according to the Shulchan, the Mechaber, you have to eat it a half hour, in other words, after the time of mincha. We'll stop here and we'll pick it up next time.
Shikol Ferry, thank you. Does anybody have any comments? Feel free to unmute yourselves. As I mentioned at the beginning, watch for the premiere of our YouTube channel. And today's shiur will be uploaded, let's say, before the top of the hour.
Oh my God. You're getting a whole education.
Now you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself.
No, it's just a couple of buttons to press. So
okay. You're getting a whole education.
Yes, I am.
You're going to become a real IT person by the time all this is over.
Soon we'll open the Eisenberg University. That might be a nice income stream for the shul.
What?
We can sell subscriptions for the shul.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?